starting with Section 140, which defines what a foreign corporation is. A foreign corporation simply means a company that is formed under the laws of another country. But that country must also allow Filipinos or Philippine corporation to do business there. This requirement is called reciprocity, which means that if your country let us do business there, then we'll also allow your companies to do business here. Now, can a foreign corporation immediately do business in the Philippines? The answer is no. Before they start their operation here, they must secure a license from the SEC and a certificate of authority from the appropriate government agency. For example, if a foreign insurance company wants to offer insurance here, it can operate right away. It must get an SEC license and also comply with the requirements of the Insurance Commission. Next is Section 141, which deals with foreign corporations that were already operating here before the revised Corporation Code took effect. Foreign corporations that were already licensed before the revised Corporation Code took effect. These are the corporations that obtained their license before the revision of the code can continue operating under their existing licenses. However, they must now comply with the new provisions of the code and any special laws that apply. Now, let's discuss Section 142, which sets the requirements for applying for a license. A foreign corporation must submit certified articles of incorporation and bylaws, and their English translation if needed, and a sworn application with details such as incorporation date and term, principal office address abroad, name and address of a resident agent, business location and purpose in the Philippines, names and addresses of directors and officers, and their capital stock details and financial solvency. Additional documents include a certificate from its home country confirming Filipino entities are allowed to do business there and the applicant is in good standing, and a financial statement showing assets and liabilities. Some industries, like banking, finance, and insurance, must comply with additional requirements under other laws, and in some cases, other foreign corporations may need prior approval of specific government agencies. Now, before we go any further, here's a question. When does a foreign corporation actually need a license? To answer that, we need to understand what counts as doing business in the Philippines. The law doesn't give fixed definition, so instead, we rely on two tests, the substance and continuity test. The substance test looks at whether the foreign company is performing activities that are part of its core business. The continuity test checks if those activities are regular, repeated, or continuous. So, if a foreign corporation satisfies either of these tests, they are considered to be doing business, and they must secure a license. To understand these tests better, let's have examples. A foreign company entered into three separate transactions with a Philippine company involving the sale of coconut crude oil. When the local company failed to deliver, the foreign firm filed a case for damages. So, was the corporation or the foreign company doing business in the Philippines and therefore required to have a license? The answer is no. The Supreme Court said that the three transactions were all related to the same failed delivery. The foreign company was simply trying to recover its losses and give the local company a chance to fulfill its obligation. Even though there were three transactions, they were all part of one failed deal and there was no intent to regularly operate in the Philippines, so the company was not doing business, and this led us to the doctrine of isolated transaction. Under this principle, even if a foreign corporation has no license, it may still sue or be sued in the Philippines as long as the act is only one time or occasional transaction. So even if a foreign company enters into a transaction in the Philippines, it doesn't automatically mean it is doing business. If the act is only single, occasional, or incidental, and there is no intention to continue operating here, then the law treats this as an isolated transaction. That's why in the coconut crude oil case, the foreign company didn't need a license.
So now let's talk about Section 143, issuance of a license. So before a foreign company can do business in the Philippines, it needs a license from the Securities and Exchange Commissions or SEC. The SEC gives this license only if the company completes all the requirements and follows the Philippine laws. Once they get the license, they can start doing business in the Philippines. But there's an important rule. Within 60 days, they must deposit securities of financial instruments worth at least 500,000 with the SEC. This deposit acts as a security or protection for their creditors here, meaning if the company owes people money, the deposit can help pay them. Every year, the Security and Exchange Commission may ask for more deposits if the company earns a lot or if the value of their deposits goes down. If the company stops operating in the Philippines and has no debts, the deposit is returned.
Moving to Section 144, foreign corporations must appoint a resident agent, and this can be an individual living in the Philippines with good moral character and a sound financial standing, or a domestic corporation in good standing with the SEC. Their role is to receive legal notices before the foreign corporation gets to set up a local office and accept summons and legal processes for or against the corporation. Take note that the appointment of a resident agent is revocable anytime by the corporation.
Section 145 talks about the service of the process of the corporation through the resident agent. So, because the foreign corporation was given a license to operate their business in the Philippines, such corporations are required by the Commission to submit a written report of attorney stating who must be the resident agent of their corporation. This legal document states that a person, the principal, grants another person, the agent, the authority to act on their behalf. In this case, the principal is a director or a duly authorized person of the corporation, and the agent is the resident agent. This agent is authorized to receive summons and other legal documents on behalf of the corporation and is given the consent to act on behalf of the corporation. Also, the corporation must file an agreement or stipulation stating that the corporation consents to the idea that service on the resident agent is legally equivalent to service on the corporation's officers at its home office. Note, though, that if the corporation has not appointed a resident agent, the commission could be the resident agent for the corporation. If there is any summons for the corporation, the commission shall within 10 days mail a copy of the summons to the corporation's home office. All expenses incurred shall be borne by the corporation in advance. There are three ways to serving summons. The first one, the resident agent can receive the summon. This agent is the one appointed by the law. The second one, the government official appointed by the law to receive the summon. And the third one is the receiver is an officer of the corporation residing in the Philippines. Summons are served only not to give opportunity to submit to the authority's jurisdiction, but also to inform the defendant of the complaint that has been raised upon them, and also give opportunity to the defendant to be heard by the court. The requirements for serving summons must be strictly followed. Otherwise, the trial court will not acquire jurisdiction over the defendant.
Section 146 states that once a foreign corporation is licensed, it must follow all Philippine laws that apply to domestic corporations. However, there are two exceptions, meaning these matters are still governed by the foreign corporation's home country, such as the laws on creation, formation, or dissolution, and the laws on internal relations among stockholders, members, or officers. In short, they follow Philippine laws in running their business here, but their internal corporate structure is governed by the laws of the country where they were originally formed.
Next is Section 147, Amendments to Articles or Bylaws. If the foreign company changes its name, rules, or structure in its home country, it must inform the Security and Exchange Commission in the Philippines within 60 days after those changes take effect. They must submit an authenticated copy of the amendment documents clearly showing what was changed. But this does not automatically give them permission to change what they do in the Philippines. Next is Section 148, Amendment License. If the foreign company wants to change its name or add new business activities in the Philippines, it must apply for an amendment license with the Security and Exchange Commission. This ensures that the Security and Exchange Commission and other agencies are aware of what the company is doing in the country. Next is Section 149, Merger or Consolidation. So a foreign corporation licensed in the Philippines can merge or consolidate with other companies, even with local ones, as long as it's allowed by both Philippine law and the law of their home country. If a foreign company merges with another company in its home country, it must report this to the Security and Exchange Commission within 60 days. If the foreign company is the one that disappears or it absorbed, it must also apply to withdraw its license since it no longer exists as a separate company. Next is Section 150, Doing Business Without a License. So if a foreign company does business in the Philippines without a license, it's breaking the law. That company cannot file any case in the Philippine court or government agencies, meaning it has no legal standing here. However, it can still be sued in the Philippine courts for any wrongdoing or violations. In short, no license means no legal protection.
Section 151, Revocation of License. A foreign corporation's license to operate in the Philippines can be revoked or suspended by the Securities and Exchange Commission, primarily for failure to comply with administrative and legal obligations. These include not filing its annual report, failing to pay requisite fees and taxes, failing to appoint and maintain a resident agent, or neglecting to report changes concerning its agent address or corporate documents like articles by law or merge reports. Furthermore, the license can be revoked for engaging in misconduct such as misrepresenting material information in submitted documents, operating outside its authorized purpose, acting as an agent for another unlicensed foreign entity, or any other act that renders the corporation unfit to transact business in the country.
Section 152. After the revocation of the license of the foreign corporation to transact business in the Philippines, the Commission or SEC shall issue a certificate of revocation. The Commission shall give a copy of the certificate to the appropriate government agency and shall also mail a copy of the certificate to the corporation's home office in the Philippines, attached with the notice of revocation.
The procedure for a foreign corporation wishing to leave the Philippines is outlined in Section 153. The company must submit a petition to have its license revoked, but only when three requirements are satisfied with the SEC allow the withdrawal. First, there must be a complete settlement or compromise of all claims or obligations incurred in the Philippines. Second, all government fees, taxes, and levies have to be paid. Thirdly, a publication with a wide readership must print the petition once a week for 3 weeks in draw. The SEC won't grant a certificate of withdrawal until these conditions are met.
Title 16 discusses the investigation, offenses, and penalties. Section 154 focuses on the investigation and prosecution of offenses of a corporation. When the Commission suspects that a corporation might be violating a rule, a regulation, or an order of the SEC, they may investigate this alleged violation. It is in the power of the SEC to investigate an alleged violation of a code, rule, regulation, or order of the Commission. After the investigation, any findings, opinions, orders, and any other information concerning the public may be published by the Commission without violating the Data Privacy Act of 2012. The SEC should give notice and cooperate with the appropriate regulatory agency when publishing any information involving companies, to the public. Section 155. This section details the Commission's powers regarding the administration of oaths and the issuance of subpoenas and documents. 1. They can oversee the oath and affirmation taking. 2. The Commission can issue a court summons to produce evidence or documents. 3. Commission can take testimony necessary to the investigation. And 4th, and lastly, it may perform other acts necessary for the proceedings or the investigation. Section 156 is when the Commission has the sufficient evidence to seize or stop the operation of a corporation. When the Commission has enough evidence that a corporation really violated any code, rule, or regulation of the SEC, they can issue a cease and desist order to stop the operation and transaction of the corporation. When the violation is so serious, like fraudulence, or can reasonably be expected to cause significant, imminent, and irreparable damage or injury to the public safety or welfare, the Commission can issue a cease and desist ex parte, which can be issued without the presence of the violator to desist the operation of a corporation immediately. An ex parte cease and desist order is valid for a maximum period of 20 days. This is a temporary measure. After the initial 20-day period, the ex parte order can be made permanent. However, this can only happen after due notice is given to the affected party and a hearing is conducted, ensuring their right to be heard. Lastly, the Commission can proceed to the criminal prosecution if there is sufficient evidence to the Department of Justice in accordance to Section 158 of the Revised Corporation Code.
Next, Section 157, Contempt. Any person who fails or refuses to comply with a lawful order, decision, or subpoena issued by the Securities and Exchange Commission without justifiable cause may be held in contempt after due notice and hearing. The penalty for contempt is a fine not exceeding 30,000 pesos if the refusal constitutes a clear and open defiance of the Commission's directive. A daily fine of 1,000 pesos may also be imposed until full compliance is achieved.
Let's talk about Section 158, Administrative Sanction, or the Securities and Exchange Commission power to punish. In simple terms, if the Securities and Exchange Commission finds that a corporation broke any rule, the code, its own rule, the Securities and Exchange Commission can impose several penalties. The penalty severity depends on how bad the violation was, how often, how serious, and how many people were involved. These are the following penalty type and the details. The first one is fine or the penalty amount. A fine from 5,000 to 2 million pesos, plus an extra fine up to 1,000 a day for as long as the violation continues, but the total fine cannot go over 2 million pesos. The second one is the cease and desist order, a permanently order telling the company to immediately stop a specific illegal activity. The third one is the suspend or revoke registration. The Securities and Exchange Commission can temporarily stop or permanently cancel the company's official registration or the certificate of incorporation, meaning it can no longer legally operate as a corporation. The last one is the dissolution and forfeiture. The company is shut down entirely and the asset or what it owns can be seized or taken away.
Next, Section 159, Unauthorized Use of Corporate Name Penalties, mandates that the unauthorized use of a corporate name is subjected to a penalty, which is a fine ranging from a minimum of 10,000 pesos up to a maximum of 200,000 pesos. Next, Section 160, Violation of Disqualification Provision, Penalties. A director, trustee, or officer who willfully conceal a disqualification, such as conviction for serious offenses, violating the corporation or securities regulation codes, or being found liable for fraud acts, is subject to a fine of 10,000 pesos to 200,000 pesos and permanently disqualification from corporate office. If this violation causes injury or detriment to the public, the penalty is increased fine ranging from 20,000 pesos to 400,000 pesos. Next, Section 161, violation of duty to maintain records to allow their inspection or reproduction penalties. Penalties are imposed for the unjustified failure or refusal to maintain corporate records or to allow their inspection or reproduction as required by law covering bylaws, corporate books, non-stock member list, OPC records, and reportorial submissions. The standard fine for this violation ranges from 10,000 pesos to 200,000 pesos. However, if this violation proves injurious or detrimental to the public, the fine is doubled, ranging from 20,000 pesos to 400,000 pesos. The Securities and Exchange Commission can also utilize its separate contempt powers to emphasize the severity of withholding crucial records such as minutes, ownership structure, and business transactions from authorized parties like directors, trustees, stockholders, and members.
Now, let's proceed to Section 162. Just remember the rule. Don't lie on required reports, because it is a crime for any person to sign off on a report required by law if they know that report contains incomplete information, inaccurate information, false or misleading statements. In short, if you willfully sign a report that you know is false, you will face penalties. So what are these penalties? So first is the standard penalty. This is for any person who willfully certifies the false report. A fine for this is between 20,000 pesos to 200,000 pesos. Next is the higher penalty. This applies specifically to the auditor or responsible person. This is if the false certification causes harm or damage to the public. The fine for this is between 40,000 pesos and 400,000 pesos. In simple analogy, think of it like a strict mandatory school attendance sheet. If you're the one in charge and you sign the sheet claiming all students were present, then you know half of them were absent. That's willful false certification. If that lie causes a public problem, the penalty is worse. Section 162. When the auditor and directors team up to lie, this law targets a very serious form of corporate misconduct called collusion. Who is involved? An independent auditor works in collusion with the corporation's directors or representatives. So what do? The auditor signs off on the company's financial statement even though they know the statements are incomplete or inaccurate, failure to give a fair presentation, false or misleading information. Essentially, the auditor is getting paid to look the other way or actively help the company hide its truth. The penalties for this are, first, standard collusion fine, which is ranging from 80,000 to 500,000 pesos. Next is higher fine for public harm. When this happens, so this happens when the fine is increased if the certified report is fraudulent or if it causes injury to the general public. The fine for this is higher, fine ranging from 100,000 pesos to 600,000 pesos. In simple terms, auditors are supposed to be the financial police. If an auditor team up with a company they are supposed to be policing and lies on official documents, they face passive fines, especially if that lie hurts the public. Section 164. This law penalizes people who use fraud to get a corporation officially registered. Who is covered? Anyone who is responsible for the fraudulent formation or who assisted in the fraud, whether directly or indirectly. What is the offense? The core offense is obtaining corporate registration through fraud. This means using false documents, misleading claims, or lying about required details just to get the government to approve the company's existence. So imagine lying on a school application about your grades or qualifications just to get accepted. This is the corporate equivalent. So the penalties for this are, first, standard fraud penalty For those responsible for the fraud, the fine is between 200,000 pesos up to 2 million pesos. For the higher penalty for public harm, when the penalty increases significantly if the fraudulent registration is injurious or detrimental to the public. A fine is 400,000 pesos to 5 million pesos. So this law ensures that anyone who tries to create a company on the foundation of lies faces massive fines, especially when that lie ends up harming other people. So for the crime running a business through fraud, this law targets a corporation that conducts its business through fraud. This means the core way of the company to make money, sells product, or operates involves systematic lying or deception. Who is targeted? The corporation as legal entity, not just the people running it. What is the offense? The company is essentially a fraudulent enterprise, tricking customers, partners, or the market to achieve its business goals. In simple analogy, this is not just one employee lying on a single report. This is the company, for instance, being a massive Ponzi scheme, selling fake products as real ones, or systematically misleading customers about its services. The fines for this are first standard fraudulent business fine ranging 200,000 pesos to 2 million pesos. Next is when penalty increases significantly if the fraudulent business practice is injurious or detrimental to the public. The fine is between 400,000 pesos up to 5 million pesos. In simple terms, if a company whole business model is based on cheating, it will be hit with massive fines, especially if the cheating hurts the public.
Next is the Section 166 or the acting intermediaries for graft, when the company is a tool for fraud. In simple terms, if a corporation is used as a front to commit high fraud or corruption, the company itself is severely fined 100,000 to 5 million pesos. The crucial part is if the corporation staff, officers are caught doing graft and the company failed to set up clear anti-corruption safeguards like a strong code of ethics or clear procedures, it will be automatically presumed that the company is liable or this is the prima facie evidence. Let's give an example. Picture a large construction firm. Mega Building Corporation, whose corporate bank account is secretly used to funnel money to a government official in exchange for a lucrative guaranteed contract. In this case, Mega Building Corporation itself is a tool for fraud and faces a massive fine, perhaps 3 million pesos. The law is especially strict here if the SEC proved that the company's financial officers were involved in the bribe and the company did not have a strong code of ethics or clear anti-bribery training in place. The company is automatically assumed to be liable because it failed its duty to prevent corruption. Section 167, engaging intermediaries for graft, or hiring someone to do dirty work. In simple terms, if a corporation hires an agent or middleman or an intermediary to do something corrupt, like paying a bribe that benefits the corporation is fined 100,000 to 1 million pesos. Let's give an example. Let's say Swift Logistics Corporation wants to speed up the approval process for a new warehouse permit but doesn't want the officers to directly implicated in a bribe. Instead, the company hires a consultant or the intermediary and pays them a large, suspicious consulting fee, knowing that the consultant will use that money to pay off the officials. Even though the company didn't pay the bribe directly because they hired someone else to perform the corrupt act for their benefit, Swim Logistics Corporation is still guilty of engaging an intermediary for graft and will be fined, for instance, 500,000. Let's proceed to Section 168, Tolerating Graft or Ignoring the Corruption. In simple terms, this targets the directors, trusters, and officers personally. If a high-ranking official knowingly fails to punish, report, or take action against corruption or fraud being committed by officers in the company, that official is fined to 500,000 to 1 million pesos. It is a penalty for a willful blindness and inaction. Next is Section 169, Retaliation against Whistleblower or Protecting the Truth Tellers. In simple terms, a whistleblower is someone who reports truthful information about a violation of the corporate code. If anyone knowingly and intentionally harms or interferes with a whistleblower jobs or livelihood as a revenge for reporting, they will be fined 100,000 to 1 million pesos.
Section 170. Other violation of the code, separate liability. This section addresses violation of the code or its amendments that do not have a specific penalty assigned elsewhere. The punishment for such violation is a fine, with the amount ranging from 10,000 to 1 million pesos. If a corporation commits the violation, it can be dissolved after a proper legal process involving notice and hearing before the relevant commission. However, even if the corporation is dissolved, the individuals in charge, such as directors, trustees, and officers, can still be held for responsible and face legal action for the violation. This section does not cancel out any other reason for corporate dissolution as stated elsewhere in the code. Furthermore, liability under this section is separate from any other administrative, civil, or criminal liabilities that may arise under this code or other laws, meaning that individuals can be punished under the section and face additional penalties for the same action. Section 171. Liability of directors, trustees, officer, or other employees. This section specifically applies when a corporation commits a violation, granting the court the discretion to decide who will be penalized. Potential targets for the penalty include the corporation itself, its directors, trustees, stockholders, members, officers, and other employees. The court can impose a penalty on those who are responsible for the violations or whose action were indispensable to its commission. For example, if a corporation is found guilty of the fraud, the court might fine the corporation for a large sum of money. Additionally, if the court determines that the CFO was directly responsible for the fraudulent activities, the CFO could face personal fines or even imprisonment in addition to the corporation fine. Furthermore, if a junior accountant was ordered by superiors to falsify documents, and this falsification was crucial to the fraud, the court might also penalize the accountant, even though they were acting under order. For this section applies to anyone who aids, abets, counsels, commands, induces, or any causes of violation of the code, or any commission rule, regulation, or order. In simpler terms, it covers anyone who helps someone else break the rules. This individual may be fined, but the penalty cannot be greater than the fine imposed on the primary violators, the main offenders. The court will determine the exact amount, taking into account how much the helper contributed to the violation. For this section, outstanding capital stock refers to the total share of stock issued under binding subscription contracts to subscriber or stockholders, indicating a legal agreement for the purchase of shares. The payment status of these shares, whether fully or partially paid, is irrelevant. They are still considered outstanding. However, treasury shares, which are shares that the company has repurchased from the open market, are explicitly excluded and not considered outstanding.
Section 174. Designation of Governing Boards. This section says that non-stock or special corporations don't always have to call their leaders a board of trustees. They can use a different name as long as it is written in their articles of incorporations or bylaws. For example, a church organization might call their governing body a council of elders instead of board of trustees. So this section is simply gives flexibility in naming the organization's decision makers. Section 175, Collections and Use of Fees. Section 175 allows the Commission to collect fees and penalties and use that money to support their work. The funds can be used for things like improving their systems, upgrading facilities, paying employees fairly, and giving trainings or seminars. For example is, if a corporation pays a filing fee, that money can help the Commission upgrade their online filing system or provide training for staffs. A penalty collected from late report submission can be used to fund employee insurance or for maintenance of office equipment. This ensures that the Commission has enough resources to function efficiently.
Let's proceed to Section 176, the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA. Monitors corporations to see if they are using their structures to evade the code's rules. If it finds such practices, it must report them to Congress along with recommendations on how to prevent or fix the issue. Congress may set maximum ownership limits for individuals or related groups in corporations considered vital to public interest. It can impose these limits to prevent anti-competitive behavior and to support national economic policies that promote public welfare and development. When advising which corporation should be classified as vested with public interest and suggesting ownership limits, NEDA must consider factors like the industry type, enterprise size, economies of scale, location, level of Filipino ownership, labor intensity, export potential, and other relevant business and industry considerations.
Section 177, Reportorial Requirements of Corporations. Section 177 explains the annual reports that corporations must submit. All corporations operating in the Philippines must file a number 1, final statements usually audited by a CPA. But if a small corporation has assets or debts below 600,000, the treasurer or CFO may just submit a sworn certification instead. Number 2 is the General Information Sheet or GIS. Is the basic company info. Corporations with public interest like large companies or banks or those with many stakeholders must submit extra reports about how much their directors or trustees are paid and how their performance is evaluated, and that's all. If a corporation fails to submit these reports 3 times in 5 years, they may be labeled as delinquent and face consequences. For example, is a small sari-sari store corporation with a minimal assets may only need a sworn certification. And next example is a big bank must submit detailed reports about their directors' pays and performance.
In Section 178 of the Corporation Code, the Commission holds visitorial powers to all registered corporations. Compliance is a must or mandatory. The unjustified refusal to cooperate with this examination can result in revocation of the corporation's certificate of incorporation, along with the imposition of other applicable penalties. Moreover, all examination results and related official interrogatories must not be disclosed. So, the core function is to ensure that all corporations operate within the bounds of the law and comply with the provision of the Corporation Code, as well as the rules and regulations issued by the SEC.
Section 179. The Securities and Exchange Commission are set primarily supervises all corporations and their representatives, promoting corporate governance and minority investors' protection by issuing rules, regulations, and opinions. The SEC has broad enforcement powers allowing it to impose sanctions for violations, issue cease and desist orders, suspended or revoke corporate charters, and pursue penalties for illegal acts like fraud or tax evasion. Furthermore, it retains jurisdiction over specific pending intracorporate and rehabilitation cases and is granted other necessary and incidental powers to fulfill its duties, with its authority protected from interference by lower courts.
Section 180, Electronic Filing and Monitoring System. This section requires the Commission to build a full online system for corporate processes. This online system should make it easier to, first, reserve and register business names. Second is register new corporations. Third is submit annual reports. Fourth is share data with other government agencies. For example, instead of lining up at the office, a new business owner can reserve a name and upload documents through an online portal.
Corporation may include an arbitration clause in its article or bylaw under Section 181. When this clause is present, disagreements over corporate governance between the company and its member investor must be resolved arbitrarily rather than in court. However, arbitration is not permitted in cases involving crimes or third-party rights. The corporate, its directors, trustees, officers, and manager are all bound by the agreement. The number of arbitrators and the process by which they will be chosen is typically by an impartial third party, must be specified, and the Commission selects qualified arbitrators in the event that party is unsuccessful. Both its own jurisdiction and the legality of the arbitration clause may be decided by the arbitral panel. Once the clause is validated, the court is required to dismiss any covered matter that is filed in RTC. Unless a bond or court order prevents it, the tribunal final ruling becomes enforceable after 15 days. So the tribunal may also provide interim measures, and the implementing regulation will be issued by the Commission.
Section 182, the jurisdiction over party list organizations. This section transfers the authority over party list organizations from the Commission to COMELEC. The transfer must be completed with 6 months after the law takes effect, and both agencies must coordinate to create the rules for this transition. For example, is if a party list group wants to register or update their information, they will now go to COMELEC instead of the Commission. This ensures that political groups are managed by the agency responsible for elections.
Moving to Section 183, while the Corporation Code provides the general framework for all corporations, specialized financial entities like banks, non-banks financial institution, and insurance company must primarily comply with their specific industry law. However, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and Insurance Commission retain their primary authority to regulate and supervise these entities. The reason for this is that special law impose additional higher level requirements necessary to protect the public confidence, the public funds, and prevent economic crisis. The Section 184 is the corporate liability firewall. It ensures that no existing right or remedy against a corporation, its directors or officers, nor any liability they've incurred can be removed by 2 events. First, if the corporation is subsequently dissolved, and then second, if the corporation code itself is later amended or repealed. So this code ensures that legal accountability persists regardless of corporate or legislative changes. And now let's proceed to Section 185, To allow for a smooth transition, the law grants the corporation affected by any new requirements in the code a grace period of not more than 2 years from the act's effectivity to achieve its full compliance, recognizing that such changes cannot be implemented instantly. So, for example, consider a situation where the code introduces a new requirements for corporate governance, such as mandating an independent director. So, an existing corporation that lacks up this position has up to 2 years to amend the bylaws and elect a qualified individual.
According to Section 186, sometimes referred to as severability clause, if any of this act is ruled to be unlawful or unconstitutional, the remainder of the act is still completely enforceable. This provision prevents the entire law from being rendered unworkable just because one of its provisions is contested or overturned. The Act formally repeals Batas Pambansa Act 1968, the previous Philippine Corporation Code. Under the Section 187, the repeal clause, any current law, executive order, prudential decree, rule, or regulation that is contradiction with the new act is also repealed or modified. This guarantees that the new law has complete legal power and that there are no inconsistencies.
The revised corporation code becomes legally effective upon the completion of its publication, which must occur either in the official gazette or in at least 2 newspapers of general circulation. This requirement stipulated in Section 188 is a critical administrative step that ensures the public is properly notified of the new law's content, thereby upholding the constitutional principles of due process and ensuring that the rules governing the Philippine Corporation are officially and universally accessible.